I never thought that a family weekend would end up being an attempted murder caught between fake laughter and ice. At Lake Barrow on March 2nd, I watched my daughter Alana sink into the icy water after her in-laws pushed her for fun. I saw her head snap back against a submerged rock. Fast, brutal, final, and I screamed her name like it was the only word I remembered. They stood there. Sharon with her arms folded, Kevin smirking, Lena holding her phone like this was a TikTok moment. The air cut my throat when I ran to the edge and dropped to my knees, scanning the ripples, praying for any movement. No one jumped in. No one moved. She always overreacts, Lena said, dry as crackers. Then Sharon added, "Give her a minute. She'll come up." Alana didn't. I yanked off my boots and was about to go in when two staffers ran over from the lodge deck. One of them radioed for EMS. I stepped back, heart punching through my ribs, and pulled out my phone. Called Luther. Didn't wait for hello, just whispered, "Do what you have to do." Then hung up. They had hurt her, and they had done it before. But this time, I wasn't alone. The EMTs arrived in minutes, breaking the frozen silence with sirens. They pulled her out on a stretcher, soaked and unconscious. I caught a glimpse of her face, livid blue around the lips, a gash across her temple. She didn't move. I followed as far as they let me, then stood back while they worked. Sharon strolled toward me, dabbing her lips with a napkin. "Kids these days," she said, like we were gossiping over brunch. "She's sensitive." I didn't answer. I'd pulled my coat tighter and sat on the back bumper of the ambulance, watching Alana's chest under the emergency blanket, willing it to rise. Kevin snapped a selfie of the group with the lake behind them. Sharon flashed a peace sign. I caught it all. I took my own photos, of them smiling, of Alana strapped to the gurney, of the ice still broken and a jagged halo where her body had been. Later, at the hospital, I gave a copy of everything to Luther. He was already in motion. He didn't say much, but he handed me a name, scribbled on a folded receipt. State Medical Examiner. Under it, just 2 words, "Start digging." 3 weeks earlier, on February 9th, the email arrived with the subject line, "Family First Annual Retreat Invite." I was sorting coupons at the kitchen table when it buzzed in. The message was cheerful, almost sugary. Lena's name in the sender field. Join us for a weekend of bonding, nature, and renewal at the Lakeside Lodge. She'd pasted a stock photo of a steaming mug by a snowy window, and underneath, a note in parentheses, "Alana's so excited. She says it won't be the same without you." I stared at that line for a long time. I should have closed the laptop and deleted it, but instead, I forwarded it to Alana, just to see if she'd say something more personal. She called me 10 minutes later, out of breath like she'd run a race. "Mama, please. I know how they come off sometimes, but this is a big deal for Kevin's family. His mom's obsessed with tradition." I didn't say what I was thinking, that the only tradition I'd seen so far was them treating me like lint under their heels. I stayed quiet. "They're trying, I promise," she said. "This year they even invited the spouses, parents. Sharon picked the lodge herself. It's supposed to be beautiful." The way she softened her voice, like we were walking a tightrope. I knew that tone. She wanted peace, wanted me to swallow my doubts and play nice, if only for a weekend. I asked who else was going. She listed off cousins, aunts, friends of the family I'd never met. I waited for my name, and when it came last, almost an afterthought, I felt the distance between us settle like cold air. Still, I opened the link and clicked RSVP. Yes, I typed a message, looking forward to it, "See you all there," then deleted it. I left the confirmation blank. After the call, I printed out the email and slid it into a file I kept in the drawer beneath my checkbooks. That file already held a few choice things. Lena's wedding invite that never included me, the Christmas photo where they cropped me out, and the baby shower flyer that said family only and arrived after the event. I had kept them all, not out of pettiness, but because proof matters. They liked to pretend I was overreacting, so I started saving receipts. In the weeks before the trip, the signs sharpened, not just unkind, but strategic. First it was Sharon, commenting at Alana's housewarming. She clocked my flats the moment I walked in. squinting as if they offended her. "Vintage?" she asked, voice bright and fake. I told her they were from a thrift store in Montclair. Comfortable, broken in. She nodded like I'd confirmed something shameful. "You're braver than me," she said, turning to Alana. "I'd never survive walking around in used shoes." I laughed once and changed the subject, but her message stuck. "You don't belong here, and we'll keep reminding you." Then came the group chat. Alana had mentioned it. Just something Lena started, so we can all stay organized about the trip. I asked if I should expect a text or email. "Of course," she said, a little too fast. 2 days later, she sent me a screenshot of the meal sign-up list. I noticed my name wasn't listed, not even as a maybe. Everyone else had emojis next to theirs, inside jokes, smiley faces, little hearts. My space was blank. I waited 3 more days, then asked Alana outright, "Did Lena send my invite?" She hesitated before saying, "She probably thought you weren't into that sort of thing." No apology, no follow-up. I could have let that go, but it built on what I already knew. People like Sharon and Lena don't confront directly. They push quietly, subtly, until you trip or leave. The final shove came the day of the flight. Sharon had insisted they book the group travel together. Same flight, same van to the lodge. I arrived early at the airport, suitcase upright, by my side, watching the main entrance. They never showed. No call, no message. After 20 minutes, I called Alana. Straight to voicemail. Lena's line rang 4 times before disconnecting. I ended up buying my own shuttle ticket and arrived at the lodge an hour after dark. The front desk had my name. The room key envelope was already creased. Someone had touched it and left it behind. When I opened the door, the room smelled faintly of mildew, and the radiator clanked like a broken pipe in an old tenement. No heat. Just a folded towel on the bed, a chipped mug by the sink, and silence thick enough to chew. I wasn't family. I was bait. Once at the lodge, the isolation wasn't imagined. It was methodical. My room stayed cold the entire first night. I called the front desk at 10 p.m., again at 2:15 a.m., and once more just before dawn. Each time, they said someone would be up shortly. No one came. I slept in my coat, shoes still on, a scarf wrapped around my neck like a noose. The next morning, at breakfast, Sharon greeted me with a smirk and said, "You should have said something. Kevin could have looked at the thermostat." I told her the front desk had already been informed. She shrugged. "Already sipping her espresso. Must have been a miscommunication. Happens up here." At dinner that evening, they left without me. I waited in the lobby in full makeup and a pressed blouse, thinking maybe I'd misunderstood the meeting time. At 6:45, I checked the dining hall. Nothing. I texted Alana, "Are y'all at the restaurant already?" No reply. 30 minutes later, I saw Lena post a group photo to Instagram. Everyone at a long wooden table, laughing over fondue, with a caption that said Barrow family traditions. My seat was never set. The next night, it happened again. Sharon apologized with her hand over her heart, said the staff must have mixed up the head count. "So many of us to keep track of," she said, then turned to Alana and added, "Bless your mother for being so easygoing. I'd have raised hell." That wasn't a compliment. That was a test balloon to see if I'd finally snap. I didn't. But I started listening more closely. Late Friday afternoon, I passed by the upstairs lounge on the way to get tea. The door was cracked open. I heard clinking glasses and Lena's voice, clear and sharp. "It's honestly generous we even invited her. Sharon said it herself. She's the charity case from Newark. Can't exactly bring the brand upmarket with her around." Someone laughed. A man. Maybe Kevin. Then Sharon. "We can't control blood, but we can control the photos." I stood there a few seconds longer than I should have, then walked away. No noise, no confrontation. Just another line in the notebook I'd started keeping in my purse, right under the receipts and screenshots. Alana didn't know they were building a case against me, but now I was building one of my own. After hearing Lena call me a charity case, I didn't cry or rage. I waited until lights were out and voices had drifted into muffled sleep through the paper-thin walls. Then I stepped into the hallway in my slippers and coat, phone in hand, and called my brother Luther from the back stairwell, where the lodge Wi-Fi still barely held. He answered on the second ring, and before he could ask anything, I said, I need you to pull everything you can on the Barrow family, quietly. Focus on anything tied to Lake Barrow and these so-called family retreats. Luther's background in the state attorney general's office wasn't something I'd leaned on often. He handled fraud, abuse cases, insurance scams, kept to himself mostly, but when he moved carefully. The moment I said the words, something's wrong, his tone changed. Did someone hurt you? Not yet, I said, but I think they've hurt someone before. He asked me for names. I gave him Kevin's full name, along with Sharon's maiden name, Delacourt, plus Lena's, though I still didn't know if Barrow was her married or birth surname. I told him about the missing dinner reservations, the cold room, the constant baiting, the group photos I was left out of. But more than that, I told him about the silence after Alana was pushed into this trip. How none of it felt like clumsiness or social awkwardness. It felt like stage setting. Something's off about this lake, I said. They talk about it like it's sacred, but nobody actually swims. There's no joy, just ritual. Luther didn't interrupt, just wrote. I heard his keyboard clicking in the background. Then he said, give me 48 hours. I'll start with the property records, incident reports, see if anything's been buried. You think this is insurance related? I didn't know yet, but the way Sharon had smiled when talking about tradition made my stomach turn. This wasn't bonding. This was a script. And my daughter had been pulled into it without even realizing she'd been cast. Before we hung up, he asked, do I need to notify anyone official yet? No, not unless Alana gets hurt. It wasn't a warning. It was a deadline. 2 days before they pushed Alana into the lake, I opened a drawer looking for an extra blanket and found something they hadn't meant for me to see. The drawer was shallow and jammed. I had to tug it twice before it slid open. Inside, wedged between faded brochures and a half-empty lint roller, was a laminated lodge schedule from the 2022 retreat. On the back, in marker, someone had scribbled a note that stopped me cold. Same spot. Clean it after. The handwriting looked rushed, half slanted, half printed, but unmistakably deliberate. Not a doodle, not a child's game. The activity list was organized by day, printed in tidy boxes with cheerful icons. Friday, hot cocoa by the fire. Saturday, snowshoe hike. Sunday morning, circled in red Sharpie, polar plunge. Lake Barrow, South Shore, 8:30 a.m. I held the schedule like it might burn through my hands. The lodge had hosted dozens of events over the years, but this wasn't in any welcome packet or itinerary we'd received for this trip. I checked the current schedule we were given at check-in. Nothing about a plunge. No lake activity listed at all. That made the note worse. If it had been tradition, something open and honest, why scrub it from the official list? Why bury it in a drawer? The words echoed. Clean it after. Not dry off. Not warm up. Clean. I snapped photos of both sides and emailed them to myself, attaching Luther's number in case anything happened to my phone. Then I put the schedule back exactly where I'd found it and closed the drawer, soft and careful. Later that night, during dinner, I watched them more closely. Sharon mentioned how some rituals keep us connected to the land, and Kevin made a comment about waking up the old-fashioned way. No one else laughed. It wasn't funny. It sounded like a code they'd used before. When Lena reached for the wine bottle, I saw her fingers tremble for a split second before she poured. Maybe it was the cold. Maybe not. I didn't know who wrote the note or what had needed cleaning. But I knew this much. It had happened before, and they had every intention of doing it again. And this time, my daughter was in the rotation. After I found the schedule, I stayed up most of the night cross-referencing dates. It wasn't enough to feel afraid anymore. I needed a name. Something I could hand to Luther that would justify my instincts and turn suspicion into evidence. Using the lodge's spotty Wi-Fi, I dug into local obituaries and public records. It took 3 hours and a little luck, but I finally found him. Jared Michael Delacourt, age 29, died February 27, 2022. Cause listed as, quote, sudden cardiac arrest during recreational swim. No mention of the family retreat. No detail about location. Just a small service held 2 counties over. followed by cremation. But one line in the local paper's write-up stood out. Beloved cousin, known for his athleticism, his sense of humor, and his love of winter sports. You don't die of cardiac arrest at 29 during a casual swim unless there's more to the story. I kept digging, trying combinations. Delacourt, Barrow, Jared, Lake Barrow, polar plunge, accident, fatality. One entry finally turned up in a small claims archive, a sealed insurance payout dated April 2022 to Sharon Delacourt as co-beneficiary, amount undisclosed. That sealed it. I called Luther before sunrise. He picked up groggy but alert. You've got something? I read him the obituary, then the sealed payout listing. They said it was a plunge. Jared died that same weekend, and someone felt the need to clean the scene after. He didn't ask if I was sure. He said, forward me everything. Screenshots, photos, article links. I'll pull the medical examiner's report today. At 9 the next morning, I got a one-line text. Autopsy listed blunt force trauma to the back of the head, secondary to drowning. No signs of cardiac distress. It wasn't an accident, it was covered up. I walked into the main lodge for breakfast and watched Sharon pass out fresh scarves to the group with embroidered initials, family monograms, little matching pieces of unity. Alana's scarf was different. Hers had a snowflake stitched into the corner, no letter, no match to anyone else's. I didn't tell her what I'd found. Not yet. She smiled at me across the room, still trying to keep the peace, still believing this was a weekend to bond. I smiled back, and I kept my hands warm in my coat pockets, fingers wrapped around my phone, and the list of names that were about to come undone. That night at dinner, Sharon lifted her wine glass with both hands like she was christening a ship. Tradition's important, she said, scanning the table as if she were counting votes. Especially the plunge. Makes us feel alive, right, girls? Her voice was too loud for the low hum of the dining room. It didn't land like a joke. It sounded like a dare. Lena laughed on cue, sharp and theatrical, while Kevin raised his glass with lazy amusement, eyes half-lidded like he'd been through this performance before. Across the table, Alana stiffened. Her fork hovered midair. Then, slowly, she reached under the table and squeezed my hand. That one motion told me everything. She knew. Not all of it. Probably not Jared. Probably not the payout. But she felt the rot. She sensed something inside this family she didn't want to name, but couldn't quite avoid. And yet she still smiled. Still sat next to Kevin. Still tried to pass the casserole like nothing in her was screaming. I held her hand for just a moment longer before letting go. Quiet acknowledgement was all we had. Sharon shifted her gaze toward us. We'll be up early Sunday, she said, so don't overdo it tonight. It's cold out there this year. She winked at the waiter as he refilled her glass. A little ice in the lungs keeps you young. Nobody at the table reacted like it was odd. Nobody blinked at the thought of shoving themselves into freezing water before breakfast. Alana looked down at her plate. Lena reached for more wine. The table moved on like nothing had been said, like it was all normal. I picked up my water and sipped it slowly, watching the condensation run down the side. If Sharon was trying to send a message, I had received it loud and clear. Later, back in my room, I opened the notebook I'd started keeping, tucked inside the lining of my suitcase. I recorded the quote word for word, dated it, logged the witness list. Then I added one sentence underneath. She rehearsed this, because that's what it was. A stage, a script, and a ritual, dressed in family language. The plunge wasn't for joy. It was to bind them in silence. The water was cold, but the intent behind it had heat. The next morning, I waited until everyone was out snowshoeing to slip into the main lodge's reading room, a space they used for yoga and card games, but more importantly, where Lena had carelessly left the family's shared iPad the day before. I didn't have a password, but the email app was open, already signed in. That was their first mistake. I scrolled fast, screenshotting what I could before nerves made my hands shake. Buried between RSVP confirmations and spa reservations was a thread labeled trip insurance details. The sender was Kevin. The replies were from Sharon and Lena. In one, Sharon wrote, "Let's do it early this year." Jared was too late in the day, made everything messy. Kevin responded, "We'll finalize at the lodge. Bring notarized copies." And at the bottom of the chain, a file attachment, PDF, password protected, labeled Plunge 23 Beneficiaries. I took the shot, backed out, and checked the Messages app. One thread from an unknown number caught my eye. Just a single text from 2 weeks ago. No drama this year. Just a splash, no breaks. Lena had responded with a thumbs-up emoji. That language again. Just a splash, no breaks. Like pain was a leak that needed sealing. I closed the iPad carefully, making sure nothing looked disturbed. Back in my room, I cataloged everything. Screenshots, timestamps, even the IP address from the message footer. Then I emailed it all to Luther with a subject line that read, "They're planning something." He replied an hour later, "Got it. Insurance documents registered. I'll try to break the password. Good work. Don't confront. Not yet." That "not yet" chilled me more than the lake ever could. By afternoon, they were back from the trail, rosy-cheeked and full of hot cider. Sharon walked past my door, humming. Kevin knocked on Alana's, asked if she was ready for the challenge. Alana didn't answer right away. I pressed my ear to the wall and heard Kevin say, "It's just a tradition. You skip it, people notice." That was it. No pressure, no threat, just the implication of shame. And shame, I was learning, was the real currency in that family. The plunge wasn't about the water. It was about control, obedience dressed as legacy. And I'd just uncovered the ledger they used to manage both. By Saturday night, Luther cracked the PDF. He called just after 9, voice low and tight, like he was reading a verdict he didn't want to deliver. Kevin took out a new policy 2 weeks ago. $500,000. Alana's name is listed as secondary beneficiary. He paused. Primary is him, but if he's unable, it rolls to her. And guess who signed as witnesses? I didn't answer. I already knew. Sharon and Lena. It's notarized. Time-stamped the day before the trip. I sat at the edge of the bed with the phone pressed to my ear, staring at the scarf they'd given Alana. The one with no monogram. Not hers, not theirs. Something in between. Disposable. They took out a policy on her, I said. I needed to say it aloud, needed to hear it outside my head. They did, Luther replied. And here's the kicker. It was processed through Kevin's law firm. One of their junior notaries signed off. A lifetime of tired snapped into focus in that moment. Every dinner, every smile, every warm-sounding excuse, it had all been preamble. They hadn't just planned a plunge. They built it like a case file, with signatures and fallback clauses, with alibis already warming in the oven. They're setting her up like they did Jared, I said. Worse, Luther replied, because this time they made it look generous. I sat with that, with the knowledge that my daughter's safety had been reduced to a line item, that her trust had been papered over with friendly fonts and notarized betrayal. Downstairs I could hear laughter from the common room, fire crackling, glasses clinking. Sharon's voice floated up, lilting and smug. Last night, people. Let's make it count. I didn't join them. I stayed upstairs and opened the envelope I'd prepared earlier, the one with every printed screenshot, every note, every time-stamped message, and record of omission. I added a copy of the policy to it, slipped in the photo of the laminated schedule from 2022. Then I sealed it, wrote for Luther, "IF I'm not back by Monday" in black marker, and taped it under the wooden slats of the dresser drawer. If they were documenting a death, I was documenting a motive. And if Sunday morning came with cold water and crocodile tears, they wouldn't be the only ones with paperwork ready. Sunday morning arrived without ceremony. No knock at my door, no reminder of the challenge, just the silence of coordination. I stepped out into the hallway to find the others already downstairs, their voices faint echoes from the lakeside. The air cut sharp, colder than it had been all week. I didn't stop for breakfast. I didn't speak. I followed the path down toward the dock, one slow step at a time. They had gathered in a half moon by the water, Kevin stood closest to the edge, shirtless, already barefoot. Sharon wore a puffer jacket, the hood down, sunglasses on despite the gray sky. Lena had her phone out. Alana was in the middle, hugging herself, sleeves rolled to the elbow like someone halfway dressed for something she didn't want to finish. Kevin turned and shouted, "You ready, babe?" His smile was wide, bright, performative. Alana nodded once, quick and small. "Let's make it a group one," Sharon added, gesturing like a director blocking a scene. "It's more fun that way." But no one else stepped forward. It wasn't meant to be a group plunge. It never had been. Alana approached the dock alone. Kevin stood behind her, hands at her waist, his tone still light. "Just breathe. It's tradition." She took a step, then another. I saw her knees buckle slightly. She hesitated, turned halfway as if she might speak. But Sharon said, sharply, "Don't look back. It ruins the photo." I didn't see the push itself. I saw the result. Alana's foot catch, her balance falter, then her body pitch forward in a sudden jolt. Her arms flailed once before she hit the water with a slap that cracked the air. Then silence, then bubbles. She didn't come back up. For half a second, they watched, frozen, not from shock, but calculation. Then Lena laughed, too loud, too soon, and muttered, "She's being dramatic." I ran. My feet hit the dock, just as one of the lodge staff came running from the opposite trail. He had a walkie. I had a scream. Together, we hit the edge and saw her floating just beneath the surface, hair splayed like dark branches. They pulled her out while Sharon recorded nothing, and Kevin checked his watch. My daughter wasn't moving, and I had just recorded a murder disguised as tradition. The hospital lobby smelled of antiseptic and burnt coffee. I sat hunched in a plastic chair, still wearing the coat stiff with Alana's blood and lake water. My fingers were red from where I'd tried to help the EMTs lift her, though they'd told me to stay back. Every sound, an elevator ding, a distant cough, felt like it came from underwater. I couldn't pray out loud, so I just repeated her name under my breath, a rhythm meant to keep her tethered to me somehow. Across the waiting area, Sharon sat upright like she was attending a board meeting instead of waiting to hear if her daughter-in-law would live. She had changed clothes, her hair was dry. When the nurse approached with an update, Sharon was the first to rise. "Excuse me," she said, all charm and polish. "Does my daughter-in-law have a DNR on file?" The nurse blinked, thrown off. Sharon smiled thinly. "I only ask because she's had health issues before." Kevin might have mentioned it. Health issues, as if concussion and drowning were pre-existing conditions. I stood then, slow but steady. "She's 31, I said. "And no, she doesn't have a DNR. She's not done living yet." My voice didn't rise, but it carried. Sharon gave me a glance that could have cut glass, then turned away, pretending to read a brochure about hospital volunteer programs. At that moment, my phone buzzed in my coat pocket. A message from Luther, records pulled. Sharon's done this before. I slipped outside to read the rest. He'd attached a summary of 2 prior incidents. 1 accidental fall at a lake property in Vermont, 1 boating mishap during a reunion in Maine. Both involved insured relatives. Both settlements paid out within 3 months. He'd already notified a contact at the AG's office. "Sit tight," his last line said. "We're coming." Back inside, I watched Kevin pacing by the vending machine, head down, whispering into his phone. Not grief. Coordination. Even now, he was managing optics, rehearsing the version he'd tell the police. Sharon had started coaching Lena, smoothing the edges of their story before it hardened into testimony. I didn't interrupt. I just reached into my bag and powered up the voice recorder I'd bought that morning from the hospital gift shop. If they wanted to play memory games, I was ready to record every lie. I didn't go home after the hospital. I didn't sleep either. I sat in the hallway outside Alana's room until sunrise, watching the rhythm of her breathing shift from mechanical to her own. When the nurse confirmed she was stable, I left long enough to charge my phone, get a cup of coffee that tasted like burnt cardboard, and start making calls. The first was to Pastor James from New Hope Baptist. He picked up on the second ring, voice warm but clipped from early morning. I didn't give him the full story, Just said I needed to host a family gathering that coming Saturday. Private, quiet, but important. I need the fellowship hall. No banners. Just chairs, coffee, and a projector. He didn't ask questions. He simply said, "We'll have it ready." Next, I wrote the emails. I kept the subject line light, a moment of thanks and reflection. I addressed it to Sharon, Lena, Kevin, and a few people they'd included on previous group threads. Sharon's cousin Dennis, Kevin's best friend Marcus, two of Lena's sorority sisters. The tone was polite, measured. I told them we were planning a small gathering to honor family tradition, to share memories, and to reflect on what nearly happened. I knew the word reflection would appeal to them. It sounded neutral, harmless, like something that could be spun to their benefit. I hit send before I could second-guess the language. Alana was still asleep when I returned to her room, but her heart monitor was steady, and the bruising on her face had dulled from purple to something quieter. Her hands were wrapped in gauze. Her breathing was her own. I sat beside her, held the tips of her fingers gently, and promised, soft enough that only she could hear it, that this would never happen again. That afternoon, I went to a print shop and made 50 copies of what I was calling the reflection packet. Inside were the emails, texts, and screenshots, a timeline, names, dates, file attachments with metadata. I even printed the insurance document Kevin filed, bolded the section that listed him as the initiator and Sharon as the witness. The man at the counter asked if I wanted it bound. "No," I said. "I want them to feel the paper in their hands." By Friday night, I had RSVPs from all of them. They couldn't resist a chance to control the narrative. Saturday morning, I arrived at New Hope an hour early. The fellowship hall smelled of lemon cleaner and wood polish. Fresh, clean, like something honest was about to take place. Pastor James had followed my instructions to the letter. Plain chairs, a long table for refreshments, and a screen mounted at the front where the projector waited on standby. On every seat, I placed a reflection packet, neatly stapled, name facing up. By 10:20, they began to arrive. Sharon came first, wearing camel wool and pearls, nodding politely at James as if she were stepping into a charity brunch. Kevin followed, jaw clenched, no coat, sleeves rolled up like he wanted to project ease. Lena came last, phone in hand, already half scrolling, her smile tight and unfinished. A few of the extended family trailed in behind them, unsure why they were there, but unwilling to miss a performance. I welcomed everyone from the podium with the same measured tone I'd used in the email. "Thank you for being here. Alana is recovering, but not everyone survives tradition. Today is about clarity." Then I clicked the remote. The first slide was a photo. Lake Barrow, partially frozen, the dark break in the ice where Alana's body had gone under. No caption, just silence. Then came the laminated 2022 schedule, followed by the handwritten note. Same spot, clean it after. I watched Sharon's expression stall. Her fingers twitched toward the packet in her lap, but she didn't open it. I kept going. An audio clip played. Sharon's voice from dinner, echoing off the fellowship walls. Especially the plunge. Makes us feel alive. A few guests turned toward her, brows raised. Next slide. The insurance timeline. Kevin's signature. The notary's seal from his own firm. The policy date just 1 day before our trip. From the corner of my eye, I saw Lena stiffen. I passed out screenshots of her text exchange. No drama this year. Just a splash, no breaks. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. No one moved to stop me. By the time I was done, the packets lay open in nearly every lap. Only Sharon's remained sealed. I stepped away from the mic and poured myself a cup of coffee. The next move would be theirs, but for once, they'd be reacting to me. Silence followed the last slide. Not stunned silence, not grief. Just the brittle kind that comes when people realize they've lost control of a room. Kevin shifted in his seat, lips pressed flat, eyes flicking from packet to screen to nothing. Sharon sat perfectly still, legs crossed, hands folded, like she could outweigh the consequences by pretending they weren't already crawling toward her. I stepped back up and spoke calmly, clearly. That document, I said, tapping the insurance form projected behind me, lists Kevin as initiator, Sharon and Lena as witnesses. Alana's name is second beneficiary. She didn't know. She never signed it. And now she has a scar across her forehead to prove she was never meant to. Lena broke first. "It's not what you think," she said, too fast, voice brittle. "It was just precaution. People do that kind of thing all the time for trips. It doesn't mean—" I raised a hand. "A plunge into a frozen lake is not a vacation." She fell silent. Then I passed out the final slide, a screenshot of the burner text. No drama this year. Just a splash, no breaks. Printed large, in bold, with the phone number it came from listed right underneath. A man from Sharon's side, one of the cousins, read it aloud under his breath and turned toward her. "Jesus, Sharon." She didn't respond, just pressed her lips together and stared ahead. From the side of the room, Pastor James stepped forward. He'd seen every document the night before. I'd laid them out for him like communion. Dates, quotes, lines of intent. Now he faced them not as their minister, but as a witness. "Our duty," he said, voice heavy with resolve, "is to protect, not pretend. If this is how your family preserves legacy, then you've confused tradition with manipulation." Then he turned to me, nodded, and stepped aside. Luther, waiting near the back, came forward and handed me a sealed envelope. On the front, "For Albany AG office." I didn't open it, just placed it down on the podium, letting it rest beside the truth already laid bare. Kevin stood suddenly. "You've made your point." "No," I said, looking him straight in the eye. "Alana's body made the point. I'm just delivering the follow-up." By Monday morning, the first ripple had hit. Kevin's firm released a statement just after 9. Effective immediately, Kevin Barrow has resigned his position. No further comment at this time. I read it on my phone in the hospital cafeteria, sitting across from Alana, who still wore the bruises like fresh paint. She didn't say anything, just stared at her tea for a moment, then looked up and whispered, "He knew I couldn't swim." Her voice didn't crack, but I saw the weight behind it. That line wasn't for me. It was for herself, an admission pulled from somewhere deeper than shame. Sharon went next. By noon, the university board, where she'd chaired 2 separate endowments, released its own notice. Sharon Delacour Barrow has been removed from her advisory and leadership duties pending further review of recent allegations. No apology, no defense. Just a quiet severing before the stain spread further. I watched the headlines roll in like slow, measured waves. Lake Barrow plunge raises legal questions. Family tradition under fire. Insider documents suggest malicious pattern. Local outlets went first, then regional. The national ones were circling. Luther said it would take weeks before the Attorney General's office finalized anything, but the investigation was already active. They'd confirmed that Jared's case had been reopened for review. Lena tried to hold on longer. Her company gave her a leave of absence, citing personal matters. But the burner text leaked 2 days later. An anonymous source had forwarded it to a blogger who covered corporate ethics. The post went viral. By Thursday, her employer updated the internal directory. Her name was gone. Alana followed it all quietly, scrolling less each day. Her silence wasn't fear, it was calculation. She was studying the shape of her own survival. One night, still at the hospital, I found her reading the final page of the reflection packet. I hadn't known she'd kept one. She ran her finger slowly along the timeline, pausing over the date where her name appeared beside, quote, beneficiary. Then she looked at me and said, "It was never just about money for them. It was power, disguised as care." And that was the first moment I believed she might come out of this stronger. Not untouched, but unowned. By the end of the week, Lake Barrow had become shorthand for betrayal. The news moved faster than I expected, not just in headlines, but in tone. The first articles were cautious, full of soft qualifiers. Alleged, reportedly, possible misconduct. By Sunday, the word ritual was being used without quotation marks. Photos of Jared surfaced next to Alana's hospital image. The contrast was brutal. His obituary portrait, clean-cut and smiling, now lived beside a grainy screenshot of her unconscious on the gurney, her brow stitched, lips pale, hair matted with lake water. Kevin disappeared from public view. His firm had already scrubbed his profile, and no statement followed his resignation. Luther told me off the record that Kevin had hired counsel and entered early negotiations. He's trying to cut a deal, Luther said, trying to place the blame higher up the ladder. Sharon, of course, had built that ladder herself. With every board appointment, every glossy feature on family philanthropy, she had carefully crafted the image of a woman who valued legacy above all else. Now the word deliberate clung to her name like a barnacle. The AG's office had confirmed that 2 prior accidental deaths tied to her social circle were under active re-examination. Payout records were being unsealed. Lena fared no better. The leaked text became a meme, just a splash, no breaks, spreading faster than her PR team could chase it down. By Tuesday, every major news outlet had run a segment on the Barrow plunge scandal. Local reporters camped near the lodge entrance, trying to secure interviews with staff. Sharon's cousin Dennis went on a podcast and, in a sudden crisis of conscience, described the family tradition as a performance no one dared question. The walls were closing in. But I didn't gloat. There was no satisfaction in watching destruction, even deserved, happen in real time. What I felt was a strange, exhausted clarity. Like the fog that had clouded my instincts for years had finally cleared. And all the small humiliations, the cold rooms, the missed invitations, they had been building to this reckoning. Alana saw the coverage but rarely commented. When the anchor mentioned her name, she just turned the sound down. Her silence wasn't avoidance, it was intention. She didn't want revenge. She wanted freedom. And for the first time in years, it was within reach. Back home in East Orange, I swept the front steps just like I used to, before any of this began. The broom scraped across old leaves and salt-stained concrete, a sound so ordinary it felt like a hymn. The house hadn't changed, but I had. There were no cameras here, no statements to review, no reflection packets. Just the creak of the gate, the slow rhythm of my lungs, and the quiet peace of survival. Alana pulled up just after noon. She wore a knit cap over her healing stitches, her face still carrying the map of what they tried to do. But her walk was steady. She didn't wait for me to greet her. She came up the steps with purpose, eyes locked on mine, a familiar fire lit now by something sharper than pain. She handed me a set of keys. I recognized the brass keychain, hers, from the house she'd once shared with Kevin. I changed the locks, she said, revoked his access last night. I called the bank too, closed the joint account. He can fight it in court if he wants. I've already filed the motion to separate assets. I nodded, slow and quiet. Let her finish. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded paper. The house is in my name now, fully. I spoke to the lawyer Luther recommended. It's done. I'm keeping it. Then she looked at me, her jaw set like I hadn't seen since she was a teenager. And I'm not going back. Not to that lodge, not to Kevin, not to the versions of me that let people tell me how to belong. It didn't need a response. But I gave her one anyway. You never had to prove your worth, I said. Not to them, not even to me. She smiled. Not wide, not soft, but real. Then she sat beside me on the steps, both of us looking out at the street, like we had all the time in the world. Inside, I had folders still tucked away, documents, recordings, evidence, but none of that was pressing now. The storm had passed. The ground beneath us was still ours. She leaned against my shoulder and said, "Thanks for not letting them erase me.